really pleased to be joined on the Celtic Exchange this afternoon by Callum McFadden and Kevin McColgan, who provide what I think is an incredible service at Celtic Park in the shape of the audio descriptive commentary. This is a valuable service which notably enhances the matchday experience for fans with any sort of visual impairment, and it's great to have you both here in the studio. Kevin, tell us first of all how you first got involved in the service.
Well, first of all, it's because my father suffered a stroke maybe 13, 14 years ago now. Okay. Could be longer. And what had happened was my dad had lost the peripheral vision, and so it was to go to the football was become a wee bit more of a struggle. And then eventually I gave up his season ticket. Okay. And then there was a kind of gap between about 4 or 5 years, and he started to become aware of a service which offered audio descriptive commentary. Personally, at that time, I knew nothing about it, so me being me, I was a bit like, what's this? And we do a wee bit of research. And then what had happened was we then got in touch with the club and in touch with the commentators at the time, Ronnie Reagan and Jim Lewis, who had provided the service for a number of years. And then what had happened was, after that, my dad then got access to it, had a season ticket within the section that gets the commentary. And then what had happened was, during the COVID season, Ronnie reached out to me and asked if I wanted to become part of the team, and never looked back since.
Right, okay, so as far back as 12, maybe 13 years ago, this was a service Celtic provided?
Yeah, it actually was back even further. I think it started, I think it's about 35 years they've been doing it, maybe even more now. I think we need to consult with Ronnie for the exact date, but yeah, okay. It goes back a long time. Do
you know, that's incredible, and actually it kind of shows up my own ignorance, because I've been spending a bit of time looking into the service, you know, as a result of having you guys on. I'll get to John Attenborough a wee bit. I spoke to John and Sam the dog quite recently, which was great fun, great guys, guy and dog. And I didn't realise, I kind of thought it was a new thing. I've got to be honest with you, I thought it was maybe COVID times or maybe just before. So that's really refreshing to hear, and maybe we'll get the inside track from Ronnie, at some point on that. Callum, what's your own journey? How did you get started on it?
So in terms of how I managed to get involved, was I was writing for a website at the time called Over the Bar, and I actually interviewed Kevin about the service. And he was telling me all about it. It sounded really interesting, and obviously been doing some media work in terms of podcasts and writing. So Ronnie had stepped away at the end of, as Kevin said, just after COVID. Kevin was doing the commentary along with another commentator that we've got, Katie. And the club then wanted to have a third commentator, just with the number of games rising, with European games and any games at Hampden and things like that. So Kevin recommended me to the club, and then they reached out and said, look, we hear you're a Celtic fan, you've been doing working in media and commentary, would you be interested in joining the service? So went to meet them before the Bodo Glimt game a few years ago. Chat went really well. First game after that was then the Dundee match. I think we won 3-2. Giakoumakis scored a hat-trick. So it was very quick how it all came together. But since then, I've not looked back. And everybody from Kevin, Katie, the supporters that access the service, Alexis, Dobbin at the club, everyone's been really welcoming, and it's been fantastic. I've absolutely loved it so far.
And was the Dundee game your debut?
It was my debut, and when Dundee, they went ahead within, I think, 3 or 4 minutes, and I'm looking at Kevin, he was on with me that day, and I thought, maybe I'm the bad luck charm here, and maybe this is going to be the shortest reign ever. But thankfully, Giakoumakis to thank for getting me out of jail.
Yeah, and it all came good. Kevin, do you remember your own first game? Is that something you'd recall?
Not as nice as Callum's first game. It was actually Celtic 2, West Ham United 6.
Oh, geez, Barkas was just showing them the way to go. I remember it well.
But I always will remember Callum McGregor scoring the first goal of that match, and I've actually got the picture of that up in my wall.
Brilliant.
It's just always a nice reminder of just like that very first game. Still remember it. A crowd of 23,000 at those times. It was just a ballot for a friendly. You think back now and it's absolutely crazy. Everybody's buzzing to get a ticket for the game.
I managed to get one. It was such a strange game, wasn't it? And would that have been one of Ange's very first games at all?
Yeah, I think it was his second, because his first game was the Midtjylland game.
Right.
Midtjylland. The week before now we had that, but it was a terrible game.
Yeah.
I mean, when you think about it, that was like a Abada's debut, or one of the first games, and you thought, good player, and then Barkas was just, Barkas was Barkas, wasn't he? But yeah, it was certainly good, but I always remember it. Just a little quick thing was my dad was at the game as well. He was managed to get his first ticket back.
Brilliant.
It was good just to be there, and buzzing. I thought, I wonder how I've got on. Went and asked him, he says, you done okay, but could you tell where the players were? Because I never said where the players were. It was just I was trying my best just to keep it as simple as I could. But ever since then, and I'm sure Callum will back me up in this, I'm always very and try to be as analytical as possible about it.
Yeah, and I'm really keen to hear about the process and maybe how the audio descriptive commentary differs from regular commentary that we'll hear on a sports scene or match today and stuff, and we'll catch that just shortly. Before we do so, quite keen just generally to hear a wee bit about you lads in terms of your Celtic journey. So just as a fan and how you first came to be a fan. And Kevin, I'll maybe stick with you for that at the moment. Is it through your dad? Is that the obvious link? Is that how it came to be?
Through the family. As I said, all fair, we've got a big family, so he's got 4 brothers and 3 sisters. All the uncles, all the cousins have season tickets. It was passed down, and I've been going since 1997, regular. So my first game, which is again a point of debate between me and my dad, I always think it was Celtic 4, Kilmarnock 0, which was Harold Bratback scoring all 4 goals.
Yep.
But he thinks it was a Celtic Aberdeen game. We'll never really know now. And, but ever since One Janssen season, I've just been going regularly ever since. And since Ange Postecoglou's first season, been doing this, and makes you, makes you feel more part of the family. You've already got a family like within Celtic, because the people you sit with and you get used to them. But when we do what we do, there's just that more immense source of pride to give it to the listeners, and because my dad's there, it's giving something back.
I can fully understand that. It's also good of you to swoop in just as Rangers are ending their 9 in a row. Don't worry, I'll sit and endure the rest of it, and you can swoop in for the Wim Janssen season.
Not entitled, we'll say that. Not entitled.
Callum, what about yourself? You lads similar ages? You don't need to disclose your ages, but are you similar in age? Or
Yeah, there's a couple of years between us, I think.
Yeah, I've just recently turned 32, so I'm no problem with it. Yeah,
I'm still clinging on to my 20s for now.
I hear you, hanging on for dear life. What's your own backstory on Celtic, Callum? How did you first get into it?
So basically, an interesting one. So my mum's side of the family are all Celtic daft. My dad's side of the family were all on the dark side, shall we say. And my mum and dad split when I was really young, which meant I grew up on my mum's side of the family. And as you know with these things, whether it's passed down from your dad or your mum or your uncle or cousin or whoever it may be, there is no choice. So from a very young age, Celtic was just something that was part of the fabric at home, and football in general has always been that way too. So as I say, grew up supporting Celtic since that early stage in life, and first game for me would have been during the Martin O'Neill times, like 2001, a game against St Johnstone. Don't ask me the score, terrible at remembering these kind of things, but that was my first kind of game. And then in terms of going more regularly, I would say that started around the sort of Gordon Strachan era. I was there from time to time whenever a neighbour or my uncle or whoever could take me during the Martin O'Neill years, but it was mostly during the Gordon Strachan era I was there more regular. Yeah,
and mostly successful times as well. I'm sure you get great memories from then. Callum, you mentioned your own other media stuff that you do, different things that you've been involved in. You're a published author, I believe. Is it Behind the Curtain of the Beautiful Game? Is that your first book?
First book, yes.
First of many?
Oh, I don't know.
We'll see. But I was also having a look at some of your info earlier on. You've interviewed over 500 players and managers, and I believe you covered last season's Champions League final between Dortmund, don't I talk about them, and Real Madrid. What was that like as an experience?
Oh, it was absolutely brilliant. In terms of covering games, the first game that I covered in a media setting was Hamilton Accies against Edinburgh City in the Scottish Cup. And to go from there to the Champions League within 4.5 years or so was phenomenal. And in terms of that game itself, just the magnitude of the event was just unbelievable. Obviously, in terms of Wembley, it's a massive arena, but the fans filled it very early on, particularly the Dortmund fans, to make lots of noise. The Madrid fans came in a bit later. But just the sheer scale of the media involvement. Before the game, I was in sort of press lounge, and Peter Schmeichel was in there, and lots of different sort of media personalities. Chris Sutton, funnily enough, was there. He was working for the BBC that night. And just seeing the number of media personnel in the room before you even went out of the stand was phenomenal. Then you go out, take your seat, and it was just unbelievable. The team's warming up, the atmosphere building. You could see broadcasters pitch side. Rio Ferdinand, Jose Mourinho, they were both on punditry duty for BT Sport or TNT as it is now, and you could see all this happening, all this excitement, and it was great. One of the things I remember most was a picture of Jurgen Klopp, who was in the crowd, came up on the big screens, saw all the Dortmund fans were cheering, all the Madrid fans were booing. Then it cuts to Mourinho on the big screen, and the Madrid fans are cheering, Dortmund fans are booing, and it was just a great game. And as I say, in terms of a spectacle, it's one that I'll always remember. Brilliant
experience, and it's probably the pinnacle, certainly in terms of covering football. It's the top tournament in club football worldwide, and to be there at the final, brilliant experience. Kev, you're no stranger to having a mic in front of you. I know you've done a bit of podcasting. few years ago now, was it the Celtic end you were part of?
Yeah, the Celtic end with Stephen Ray, which happened during the COVID season as well. I think everybody was just desperate just to get some sort of release from what the worldwide pandemic was at the time, even if it was a terrible season to do. But I really enjoyed it, and it's there's nothing better for me than talking about Celtic. It's something that I've been brought up with, do it with my father most days, if not every day, family and friends. So yeah, I've done that, and then did a bit of work with the Celtic Fans TV as well, and so I really enjoyed that, like the kind of after part of it.
That's with Paul on the team there?
Yeah, Paul on the team. I still keep in touch with him. But
did you get sacked?
I didn't get sacked, no. But no, I just
but we're moving in a different direction.
Yeah. But no, it was just one of those things where just this took on board, like this just took up much more time.
Yeah.
And one of those things, but still keep in touch with the guys, and it was a very enjoyable time, and we had some good laughs.
Yeah, some good times there. Let's get into detail on the audio descriptive service and how it all works. Could you, Kev, to start with, talk us through a typical match day and how everything operates from start to finish? Maybe from your point of view, so from what you guys do, and then Callum, you can maybe pick it up from a service user's point of view, you know, how it would go for them and how they would experience a regular match day. So let's say 3 p.m. kick-off at Celtic Park. What's your day like, Kev?
Well, I always turn up round about an hour before kick-off. I generally meet my dad outside gate 2, because the visually impaired supporters are allowed to come through gate 2, so we walk through there, and generally what will happen is the equipment will be waiting for us where we sit, which is directly above the tunnel, where it would say DAF a bit, but now it's obviously changed with the makeover over the tunnel. So we get in, and I'll speak to a couple of the guys. How you doing? What do you think of the game? Here's the team sheets. What's the lineup? You know, how they doing? You know, just try and give them that experience they want to feel. And then Callum will not be too long behind me. We'll set up the equipment. We'll test it. Normally it's my dad that will test it with, let's just say, different ways of using different scores, shall we say. Yeah. He'll certainly tell us whether it's on or not. And then generally it will just be a relaxed atmosphere between myself and Callum, or whoever's, like if it's Ronnie or Katie, until about 10 to 3. And then we'll go on, make sure they can hear us, and then we'll just talk about the game and we'll go through the lineups, maybe who's the danger man for the opposition, how well maybe Celtic have been playing, who's doing well, who's not doing well, who would we want to see in the team. Just a general commentator's kind of view on it, and then before you know it, the game starts. And as I say, description is everything, is in the title. And generally what we'll do is we'll do 15 minutes where I'll take the lead, then Callum will be the co-commentator, the summariser, and then switch over and just do every 15 minutes. And then from there, it's just a case of trying to keep your composure when Celtic score, which is something I struggle with big time. And I've been told that on a few occasions.
And are you, is the kind of deal that you do need to try and keep a lid on it, or are you allowed to lose yourself in the moment? What's the etiquette in that world?
That's a bit of a strange one to answer. I mean, I think with it, like if it's at Celtic Park, obviously, I think it's, as long as you're not swearing or anything, which, you know, we try and remain as professional as we can. But it's very, very hard, and me and Callum have experienced it when there's a last minute winner. Your emotions do take over a wee bit. So if it's Callum commentating, I'm sure I've screamed down the mic. So whilst they might be hearing Callum, I'm screaming like, yes. And I have been known to deafen a few eardrums, I think, but that's what it is.
What's the equipment? What's in place? So do you guys have a mic of sorts that you're commentating into, like a headset and a mic, and the users have just got an earpiece? What's the kit?
Yeah, so it's like we have 2 mics with, like, I'm not the best at describing it, but it's 2 big boxes, and then what we have is basically that connects to a receiver box, and then everybody down below us who sit where the supporters sit on the right behind the dugout where Brendan Rodgers and management team sit, they have a separate box, like a little monitor.
Okay.
And it has been upgraded recently, but they have headphones with an aux cable, and then that connects to us, and as long as they're on the correct channel, then they can hear us, and it just works seamlessly, so they can hear that pretty clearly. And
I heard an example, Kevin, thanks, you'd sent me through some audio, and it was good for me to get a feel for it, because I think at the start, amongst other things, I'm not sure which of you guys it was, but you basically say to the service users, give me a wave if you can hear me,
yeah.
and obviously they kind of give you the thumbs up that all is good. On that note, Callum, how many fans generally access the service in a home game at Celtic Park? Do you have a number on that?
In terms of the section below us, I believe there's 30 or so below us, but there's more around the stadium.
Yeah.
I think all in, there's certainly over 50, I think, that access it in a home match day. There's 30 or so, as Kevin said, located behind the dugout where Brendan and the staff sit. But there's also fans who are in different parts of the stadium who, for whatever reason, choose to sit in their own section, but they can still request one of the monitors and headphones to access the commentary. And no matter where you are in Celtic Park, the commentary can get to you with the equipment. So you've got people in all four stands essentially accessing the commentary, but there's, I would say, 30, core fans.
Okay.
Down near us where we do the commentary.
The ultras, you would call
the
them.
Ultras, absolutely. And they're not shy in giving you an opinion either. So, so I would say definitely more than 50 on an average match day for sure.
And it's interesting to hear. Again, I wasn't aware. I thought it was just in the section where you guys are. So you guys are behind the tunnel? Is that where you are?
So just above the tunnel.
Above the tunnel, sorry. So you've got a great vantage point, and then the 30 or so sit further ahead of you behind the dugouts.
Yes.
And there's folks dotted around the stadium. I was really keen, just generally speaking, when speaking to you guys, to, I suppose, to raise awareness of the service, because, again, it's quite new in terms of my knowledge, but there'll be folks out there I'm pretty sure would really benefit from this service, but maybe just don't know that it exists. If someone finds himself in a position where they are or have been visually impaired for some time, but sit up in the North Stand, can they reach out to Alexis, who's the disabled SLO at Celtic, isn't she?
So if a fan wanted to access the service, if they reach out to Alexis or JP Taylor, the SLO, they can point them in the right direction of obviously how to access the commentary, what they would need to do, and that would probably be just a case of letting Alexis and her team know where they're sitting in the stadium so that the equipment could be brought to them, so that everything could be double checked before kick-off. It'd be simple as them basically raising an awareness with Alexis or John Paul about wanting access to the service and taking it from there.
Great, and we'll be sure to include their details later in the piece. JP will be delighted. He doesn't get enough emails as it is already, so we'll add that to the mix. Have the club, just on that note, Callum, have the club been very supportive of this venture in your own experience? As I say, I didn't realise it'd been going on for so long, but in the experience of you lads, have the club been very supportive and keen to make this as good as it can be? Without doubt.
They've invested in brand new equipment to take the commentary to the next level in terms of digital equipment. So the headset that the service users get is now digital, and it's a lot lighter and less clunky than the sort of old school equipment that we'd have started with a few years ago when I came in. So they've invested in new equipment. They're open to fans accessing the service, and Chris Duffy wants us to provide the service for as many of the women's matches as possible when there's a need and a demand for it, and that's something that we've been doing now for a couple of years as well. And again, Kevin and I, Katie, Ronnie, we're really enjoying doing those games. John Attenborough, who you've done recently, is a big supporter. He'll come to some of the men's games at Celtic Park, but he'll also request access for some of the Celtic women's games. So, in terms of support, those are the things that the club have put in place. But one other thing I would mention is the manager also provides pre-match notes for the supporters who access the service every game.
Okay.
So obviously you get programme notes, every manager puts them in the programme. So when Ange was at the club and then Brendan now, they record basically their version of those notes for the fans and normally have a little kind of personal message to the supporters listening. And that's something we get for every home game. And when Ange was here and now that Brendan's returned, both of them, it's not something that's like 20 seconds and they're away. They do record a 2 or 3 minute conversation essentially that is played to the fans before every game, and that's something that from our point of view is a great support from obviously the highest levels of the club in terms of the manager. Yeah,
that's amazing, and if you're getting buy-in from the manager, then hopefully you're getting it from all areas of the business, and it's great to hear that. So that bit of audio, that's exclusive to people in your section, that recorded piece. And you mentioned there the women's game, and I know through John that the service is available there. So do you guys and Katie and Ronnie that you mentioned, do you cover both games, the men and the women's team, when required?
Yeah, so essentially in terms of the home games, obviously there's a rota because there's 4 commentators, so we know what games we're going to be on. And in terms of the women's games, it's slightly different in the sense that obviously there's a core section of fans that are attending every home match in any game at Hampden for the men's games. For the women's games at the moment, we're finding that there's a request for the service for certain games and maybe not for others, just in terms of when kick-offs are. Some of the kick-offs are at 6 o'clock, for example, so some of the users that might not be there on those nights. They might be there for a different kick-off time. So whenever there's a demand for the service, the club provides it. Even if it was one supporter that wanted the service, the club would still provide the service with 1 or 2 commentators without questions.
Well, I remember that because I think it was me and Callum done a Glasgow Cup match between Celtic and Rangers, and there was one person requested it, and because of that, me and Callum went on a Tuesday night, and it was a very wet night, I remember, and Rangers beat Celtic that night, but it was still good because we see it as practice, and if we want to develop something, then we do it, and as say as what that as well, we've done like the Women's Cup final, and we didn't really know. The organisation on the other sides wasn't as great, so we didn't know if people could hear us because we were on one side, they were all over in the north stand, but we did eventually hear that they could hear us, so it was good in the end. But sometimes you're just like, it's always just nice and reassuring knowing that they are hearing you when sometimes you don't.
Absolutely. What about away games as such then? Is that the responsibility of the team in question? So if Celtic are away at Motherwell, for example, and any fans that would usually access the service at home games, do they contact Motherwell's team for that service?
So Motherwell, for that example, and all the away teams would provide an audio descriptive commentary service. What we found is sometimes our fans are requesting where possible if it can be some of the commentators they're used to provide the service. So in the past we've went to Motherwell, we've been at St Johnstone, Dundee United to provide the service for the fans, which has been great. But as I say, on the whole, the support, the away club, the home club that Celtic would be travelling to would provide a service which would be offered to all fans. But on occasion, as I say, we've went and provided commentary for our fans at away venues.
Great stuff. So as we've touched on, we spoke at length to John Attenborough. Him and Sam were in, and it was great to meet them. And they've got their own great story. They've obviously now completed the journey of attending all 42 SPFL grounds. I think they finished at Forfar just a week or two ago. And John was saying in a very positive sense, Kevin, that he feels that by and large clubs are buying into this and doing it really well. So as I say, I've learned today that Celtic have done this for a long time. But he says right down through the pyramid into League One and League Two, everyone's embracing it and making this effort to increase accessibility for fans. Is that your own experience of it?
Certainly. As I say, I was very naive when my father took unwell and not knowing that this service even existed. So I think I've certainly came on leaps and bounds within my own mindset as to where it come from. But I remember speaking to Callum when I reached out to him, then eventually was offered a role. It is becoming more accessible and it is going to be more in demand. And before you know it, I think it's more of a requirement in the top leagues, but it will filter through eventually because without that demand, John wouldn't have been able to complete the 42 challenge. The 42 challenge, and it's great to see, and it's fantastic. But I think it has to start somewhere, and I think Celtic, along with other clubs, have been the pioneers of this, providing these services. And you can see it as we go to these away grounds that there are so many fans that just want to experience a game. We're the lucky ones that can just walk up and go, but some people don't have that. And for us to provide that service, we're the lucky ones that can do that.
Yeah, and again, from speaking to John, he says this service has enhanced his experience of football tenfold and then some. He said he would go to the odd game before, but he wasn't able to capture what was going on. I don't know if you've seen the video that the SPFL put out on John's achievement, and they blurred some of the imagery to give an idea of what John would experience regularly for a game. And without the audio commentary, it's not really an experience at all, if truth be told. But John has said, on this very show, that the audio description, it makes it a completely different experience for him. On that as well, Kevin, I'd like to ask just how the commentary that you guys do differ. So John was saying things like it would just be such and such who's wearing green boots today, and small things like that. So is there a notable difference between the commentary that we would usually hear of a weekend in terms of that and what you guys do?
The way I always try and explain it is I could try and give an example of a passage of play. So if you're watching the game on Sky Sports and you hear the alleged Ian Crocker, he'll just say, Greg Taylor on the ball, but you don't know what it is. So we have to say, it's Taylor on the ball, but 25 yards out, he passes inside to Tati, who's about 10 yards now. He's coming over the halfway line. Then he's over the halfway line now, so he then passes to Forrester, Nicholas Kuhn. Kuhn's getting to the byline, taking on his opponent, twisting and turning. Where's he going to go? He's about 18 yards for goal, cuts to the byline, and it's as simple as that.
Did he score there? I was getting excited. You built up. I didn't know if he finished that move.
You need to listen one time. But that's the way I try and explain it. It's descriptive, and it has to be. And if you are too, I don't think there can be such a thing as too descriptive, because people, we ask for feedback off of the listeners, and they're happy to tell us, and we're happy to say, right, that's fine. We'll take that on board. And I think we're as I say again, we're the lucky ones. We want to make the experience as personal to them as possible.
Brilliant. That's great to hear. Callum, you mentioned there's a core of 30 odd folks that benefit from the service during home games at Celtic Park. Do you form, bonds and friendships of sorts with these people over the years?
Yeah, in terms of, obviously, as Kevin said, we enter the ground at Gate 2, along where the service users would enter the ground, in terms of that core. And yeah, you get to know them, and you get to know the players that they absolutely adore, and the players that they would rather see maybe substituted for someone else that week. Yeah. And that's all part of it, where, there is that ability to communicate with them before the game and sometimes even after the game as well. So obviously, for Kevin, you mentioned the likes of Ian Crocker. When you're a commentator on television, you're commentating to so many people that you probably, if you're lucky, you might meet 10 of them on your way to the shop on a random day. Whereas for us, the core group that we're commentating to, we're fortunate that we get to meet them on a regular basis. And as Kevin said, they can give us feedback of, for a goal, could you, when the goal's scored, then talk us through it, because we get replays. Could you then talk us through the replay as well, just so that we are picturing that replay? The rest of it, again, as fans, we maybe take advantage. We can see the big screen, and obviously it's the announcers telling us who scored. We're seeing the goal again, and that's something that we try and take on board. So yeah, the fact that we're able to communicate with them on a regular basis is great, and it just does form that bond. As you say, there's real togetherness within the core at Celtic Park that we provide the commentary for. But in terms of the commentary service throughout the league in the top flight in particular, I feel that there's a real bond even between the clubs. I was through at St Johnstone recently. They asked me to go through and provide some commentary along with their team as a joint commentary, and again, very welcoming as a club from top to bottom, and even meeting some of their service users as well. Mm-hmm. It was just a really great experience, and as Kevin emphasised, it makes you feel like one of the lucky ones that you're able to give something back, and hopefully something of value.
Yeah, and brilliant to see and hear that clubs are working closer together, and that's absolutely the way it should be. Kevin, do you feel that getting to know the guys that enjoy the service is one of the kind of the benefits, the perks of the job?
Certainly. I mean, when I go there on a Saturday, I mean, I was always used to going with my dad, and you would sit with the people and stuff, but now it's just a case of, sit with my dad, talk to him, but then go around everybody. How you doing, Claire? How you doing, Margaret Rose? How you doing, Dexy? Then Jimmy, and then like Katie's mum also sits in this section, so it's like trying to speak to everybody and trying to get their feel of the game, because I think it's great just asking different people how they're feeling about the game, because you're always going to get, I'm confident today we're going to score 5 or 6, and it's, I don't know. It's just great to hear. And as Cam says, when we're providing it, you can see like, for them not being able to see, they're certainly animated at times, and I just find it great to watch all aspects of it.
Yeah, brilliant. When you mentioned the replays, Callum, so are you getting VAR now?
We don't get VAR replays, unfortunately, or access to the audio the way Sky and others do. But as I say, I would say, see, in terms of the biggest challenge of the commentary, you've actually hit the nail on the head there. It is VAR, because we don't have access to VAR replays. If there's a lengthy check of, say, 2 minutes, we can obviously talk through what we remember seeing from the passage of play, but because it's quite strict, where, as you see in the big screens at Celtic Park, it just says VAR checking progress, possible offside. That's all we're working with as well, because they won't show us the replay unless it's on Sky or Premier, and they're showing the replay on their feed. We won't have access to that. So sometimes you are trying to fill that 2 minutes and be as descriptive as possible as what they could be looking at. But as you well know, sometimes we're looking for a possible offside, then there's no offside, so we look for a fibble, and that's the hardest bit of trying to keep up to the service users up to date with what's been checked, because if there's multiple checks going on at one time, it's about going through a checklist almost of, right, they've checked the offside, they're checking the fibble, and on we go. I
can imagine the fun and games with that, and it's quite frustrating being in stadium for VAR at different times. You're hoping that the times to make the big calls become tighter and tighter, but sometimes you're sitting for 2, 3, 4 minutes, and that's a lot of airtime for you guys to fill.
Well, actually, the first game that VAR was at Celtic Park was the game me and Callum done, and Celtic beat Dundee United 4-2, I think, in the end, and it was when Alexandro Bernabe was
the backward arm,
and obviously we described it as there's nothing happening there, and then all of a sudden it's the usual action, and then you're like, right, and I remember that that one, that was a good 5 minutes, and we didn't like we will. I would say this now. We didn't know what to say at times because we were a bit like we do not know. And I think that would be the biggest thing for us. It's the time they take to make the decision. I know they've got to follow a process and stuff, but yeah, that was an interesting game. The very first game, but I think we're kind of getting used to it now. We just know what to try and do,
and hopefully VAR will continue to improve under Willie Collum and co. We'll see. You guys obviously just by nature will know Celtic and their players inside out. You know, you'll know who's who, what's what, form, in and out of form, goals, assists, all that stuff. How much do you have to learn about the opposition? Is that a key part of it? Is it just kind of headlines, names and numbers and stuff? Or do you need to get a wee bit more detail about, you know, their lineup and the kind of form they're on, for example?
Just by the nature of sort of covering games, whether, as I say, whether I do it in a written capacity or for the commentary, no matter what game I do, I always just try and research both teams. Obviously, in terms of Celtic, as you say, it's common knowledge. I watch them every week, whether I'm at the game or I'm not. So I know the players, I know the way they're going to set up more often than not, and that's the easy part. For the opposition, it's looking at their sort of form guide, maybe the last 5 fixtures, who's in form, who's not, have they got any new signings, any suspensions, and sometimes if they've got a former Celtic connection. So for instance, when Falkirk came visiting a few weeks ago, obviously Calvin Miller came through the youth system, Aidan Nesbitt came through the youth system at Celtic, and it's just a case of sometimes painting that little extra picture of these are the former Celtic connections. David Marshall was always a good one when he was at Hibs, and just trying to, as I say, make the service users as fully aware as possible of the opposition, but obviously remembering that they're there first and foremost to see Celtic.
Yeah. Kevin, do you feel, and I suppose you may need to be careful with your answer here, do you guys feel that clubs, and I include Celtic in this, do need to or should be encouraged to make more noise about the services that you guys provide? As I say, I'm involved in Celtic stuff most days, picking up Celtic news, and I'd like to think I'm fairly aware of what's going on at Celtic Park. But this is something that I'm learning right now, different parts of the service. Do you feel there's maybe scope to do a wee bit more and make a bit more noise? But and I know it's not revenue generating, but it's not about that, is it? It's about making sure that Celtic and football in general is as accessible as it can be for all concerned.
I think you've kind of hit the nail on the head there. It's not, you can never be too positive about something, and this is a positive thing. So if we can make that better get as many listeners in as possible. Obviously, there's capacity restrictions at times, but I think there is people, no matter how many people I speak to about it, and I think Callum will be the same, probably where he's from, there's always someone saying, oh, I know someone that would love that.
Yeah.
And like, well, let's try and get them in. Obviously, there's processes that need to go through, and that's something that obviously you would go through with Alexis and stuff. But you can never be too positive. You can never say it too much because it is becoming, we live in such an accessible world. It needs to be more accessible throughout all of life. So this can be a small part of it, but small parts can make a big change.
Yeah, I totally agree.
So I think it's a case of all other clubs as well. They do their part, and you can see that. You can see that with the way they're promoting, like wheelchair space and accessible. Like obviously, our Twitter last night saying how well, Borussia Dortmund were giving wheelchair space to Celtic fans last night. That's great to see.
Yeah,
you've never seen that 30, 40 years ago. So I think it gives hope to people in certain positions that we're not as we're maybe a bit more lucky with certain things.
One of the things I would add to that, and you mentioned something that I suppose all clubs, whether we like it or not, in years to come may look at, and that's the sort of commercial viability of it all. That obviously isn't the be-all and end-all, absolutely not. Accessibility is the be-all and end-all when it comes to including everyone that wants to be at a football game within that football game, and that should always be the way of it in any part of life. One of the ways I think, and this isn't a Celtic issue, I think if there was a worry about commercial viability that clubs could potentially do is incorporate their audio descriptive commentary teams into providing that type of commentary, but then putting it out as radio commentary. Maybe it would be restricted to only overseas listeners with the difficulty of UK rights. I know BBC Scotland have got rights and that kind of thing, but I also do think that if there was ever a concern of it being not commercially viable, but it has to be done, that there could be ways to address that longer term, as I say, by putting the commentary out to a wider audience as well as the audience that need it within the stadium. Yeah,
and I think any ways that looking at developing and expanding and improving the service have got to be considered, and I think that sounds very positive in general. You mentioned that you lads have been doing this since post-COVID times, and for the most part they've been good times for Celtic, and hopefully they'll continue. Let's not talk about Europe, but domestically at least. Kevin, I'll come to you first. What would be your kind of standout memory or moment that you guys have commentated on?
allowed to give a couple?
Of course.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like, standout moment certainly so far was when we beat Rangers 3-0 under Ange Postecoglou with it under the lights, and that was something incredible.
Could you guys hear yourself think that night?
No, because it was quite weird. This was Katie, who was meant to be on. We couldn't unfortunately get the time off, and Ronnie was unavailable, so it was just myself, and it was my very first Glasgow derby, and I couldn't hear anything. I could hear myself a wee bit, like when I went on like 10 minutes before, trying to, can you hear me? All the usual stuff I've just spoke about, and then just when that kick off came, I couldn't hear myself, and then scored early on, and that was incredible that night. And then that was a real shifting moment. I feel it was like the tide had turned certainly for in favour of Celtic that season. But I think the weekend just before it, where Abada scored the winner, that was incredible.
Dundee United,
and I think I jumped up and the equipment came with me that Saturday. But yeah, I mean that's certainly moments. But I think like moments with this man beside me. I mean, like commentating European champions like Real Madrid, and like we've seen great goals. I mean, I always say to Callum, one of the best goals I've ever seen Callum commentate was when Mudryk scored that fantastic goal against us, because it's just, I mean, you've got to admit some goals have been scored against us, and like there'll stand out moments like that you just think, this is incredible. This is not what I would have thought I've been doing when I grew up supporting Celtic. So it is a pinch me moment for me daily, because I'm thinking I'm tremendously lucky to do what I do. Yeah,
and I think the fact that you've talked about the Dundee United goal and you've kind of lost yourself in the moment. I'm pretty sure the guys hearing that, they'd be all for that. I think they would enjoy that as much as anything. Or have you had feedback to say otherwise? You'll need to calm down, Kevin.
Yeah, my dad's always said that when it was the 3-0 game, because it was myself, my defence was I couldn't hear myself, so if I had to shout the whole night, I was going to do it. But I think Jimmy, who sits beside my dad, says, Jerry, you want to tell that boy I'm blind, I'm not deaf. Tell
that boy of yours to calm down. How was it doing a full game solo? So the joy, the benefit of a co-commentator is that you can catch a breather, catch your thoughts, bounce a few things around and prepare yourself for the next phase of play or whatever. Is it quite intense actually to do a full 90 minutes? What do you guys do at half time? These break?
Yeah. So we play the manager's notes normally. Right. And then maybe couple of minutes before it, we'll maybe tell them the half-time scores, or if we can do it like during the game. But yeah, like half-time we generally just get a breath. But when it is yourself, and the very odd occasion we've had to do that, it is hard going, and you do feel it, but again, you would do it. You would do it.
And at the end, obviously at Celtic Park, for the most part, the manager and players will take a lap of the stadium. Do you guys stay on air for that? Do you commentate on that, or do you generally wrap it up just after the whistle?
I think it depends on the game. I think every game's different, so I mean, there's been somebody just like, no, that's enough, and then but I think we try and say, that was a great game. You talk about the games and say, everybody, safe journey home, and give a wee hail at the end, kind of beat that.
Why not? Some great stories and memories there, Callum, from Kevin between the United game, definitely that Rangers game. I think it's in my top 5 of all time. What an incredible night. And obviously commentating on Champions League winners, Luka Modric and others. What's your own standout memories from operating the service?
Before I talk about the memories that pleased me, I suppose, were the Celtic results that you mentioned. Luka Modric there, being able to commentate on players of that ability first hand when you feel that they're just literally right in front of you is something that's always incredible and never gets old. And that night when we played Real Madrid, Valverde, I just thought he was absolutely mesmerising, and just watching players play at that level was phenomenal. But in terms of a Celtic perspective, the first game against Dundee, as I say, was dramatic. We go down, Mark McGee was the manager, and he was kind of much maligned at that time for Dundee. They take the lead and you think, jings, are we going to actually lose to this side? And as I say, Giakoumakis gets a hat-trick and everyone goes home happy. Certain games against Rangers, just because of the atmosphere within the stadium, which I think it helps the players and it helps you as a commentator as well, because when the atmosphere is electric, you sense that and you can feel that as well. Because when a game is maybe, I'm trying to think, probably the most difficult game I've had to commentate on, and I would say, Kevin, you were there that day with me, was the Hearts game last year towards Christmas, where poor Santa Claus got a tough time.
Tough day for him.
And those kind of days are tough, because let's be honest, it was tough on the park that day for Celtic, and you obviously are commentating to Celtic fans, but you've also got to be honest. You know, we can't exactly say, oh, we've been brilliant today and we're so unlucky to be 2-0 down. Those have thankfully been few and far between. So as I say, for me, the home games, communicating with the service users, Champions League nights, any game where the atmosphere is electric in the ground is just a joy to commentate on, because whether you were on commentary or not, you'd be excited to be there anyway, and the fact that you're there providing that service for others, you just get that adrenaline rush, and you're really excited to just get on the mic and talk football, whether that's with Kevin or Katie or Ronnie, and just talk through the opponent, commentate on the game itself, and hopefully just make the users that are accessing the service happy and enjoying it as well.
Yeah, and I've no doubt they are. And on a Champions League night at Celtic Park, the atmosphere's whipped up into a frenzy at the best of times, and you'll never walk alone not long before the players come out, and the roar when Celtic go into the huddle when the Champions League music comes on. Do you let that moment take care of itself, or do you interject at any points to let guys know?
Just with certain things, obviously, just saying to the users, that's the players into the huddle now, when they come out of this huddle, give them a right big cheer, and then you're just teeing them up for when that noise rises, so they know that it's coming. When things like You'll Never Walk Alone are on, just saying, right, make sure you're joining in and giving the team as much backing as you possibly can, and it's just that little bit of encouragement, and then knowing as commentators when to take the step back and let them enjoy the moment. That's we try and tee it up when we have to, and then obviously sit back and let them enjoy their moment.
And I think that's it, Kevin. You know, sometimes, most of the time, you know, you guys will be there filling the gaps in and explain what's going on, but sometimes Celtic Park speaks for itself, doesn't it?
It really doesn't, as Callum says it. I mean, like, I would hate to ruin You'll Never Walk Alone, or like, you know, the light shows, you know, for what they can feel sometimes. And some people can, you know, there is different levels of visual impairment within the stadium. But I think like one of the kind of things as well is, like, obviously last year we had a penalty shootout and it went all the way, and that was a very hard thing to commentate on, you know, like the semi-final, and I think this man here got a bit too nervous for the penalty.
Were you struggling?
He just like, I was like, okay.
So in fact, we had 3 commentators that day, and as I say, it was one of those where my nerves were just all over the place, and I said, I'm more than happy for you two to take this on, because
passing the buck.
I couldn't help it.
It didn't help when I had my Apple Watch and I looked at I done the stupid thing of looking at my heart rate. It was 165 BPM
through the roof.
I couldn't help it. And then when Joe Hart was stepping up, I thought,
that was a tense one, but I suppose it all adds to the drama and the excitement, and it's, as you're saying, you've said a few times now, Kevin, a privilege to be there as well. Yeah, you know, I'm sure you're there to do a job, you're there to provide a service, but there's a lot of satisfaction and enjoyment, I'm sure, you know, for what you guys do. And I was going to ask that, Kevin, what is the best bit about the service? What do you find most rewarding overall?
It's a couple of things really, because as I say, I've always loved football, no matter what it is. If it's like watching games in Cheltenham or like in Greenfield to watching the biggest stage, I love it. And I'm just very, very lucky that I'm allowed to do something that I love for the team that I love, and the team that we all love. I love doing it for my dad as well. Big shout out to him, because he introduced me to Celtic. I'll be forever grateful for that, and I love doing it for him. And for me there's that, if we're going to call it selfish, but I love seeing him celebrate a goal that I've told him about. There's just something fantastic about that for me personally, and for all the other listeners, but obviously with it being your father, there's just that wee bit more. But for me, there's nothing, like, we all love a goal, but there's nothing better when that ball hits the net and you can rise with the team, with the fans, and you're saying how good a goal that was. There's just it's very hard to describe, but for me that's the best part, and also providing the service.
Brilliant. You know, and I can hear it in you just now, Kevin, just how passionate you are about it. And shout out to Jerry. Is Jerry your dad?
Yeah, Jerry McColgan.
So big shout for Jerry. Callum, over yourself, same question, but what's the biggest buzz you get? What's the part of what you do that you find most rewarding?
In terms of football, similarly what Kevin said, for me, it might sound quite sad to certain folk, but I just love when you walk into the ground and just right away, whether it's the first game all those years ago or the next game, I just feel a real excitement to be there. Whether it's sunny, whether it's pouring with rain, I just feel that getting to watch Celtic play today, we're getting to watch a team that, as Kevin said, everyone or most people listening to the service love. You love, and if you were providing a service or you weren't, you'd be there at the game anyway, you know, and supporting the team in a different way. So for me, it's just an immense privilege to provide the service. And as I say, football for me just brings so many people together, and that's something that you hear on kind of media posts or podcasts and things a lot. But since taking up being a commentator, I actually feel that, and I see it even more, because something as simple that people might think, oh, you're just providing commentary and describing actions on play. Anyone can do that. Right, okay, you could say that's quite simplistic in itself, but there's just so much more to it, and connecting with the people at the club and even at different stadiums sometimes that are accessing the service from there, commentators, or if you're joining them, it's just, for me, incredibly rewarding, and it's something that I value and take a lot of pride in.
And it sounds like just a lot of good people doing a lot of good things and working together on it, and that's got to be a great thing all round. Kevin, Callum had touched earlier on the potential of the service growing and maybe kind of evolving, over time. Do you think there are ways in which this kind of service could evolve, or is there any ways you'd like to see it grow in the years ahead?
Well, I think me and Callum have always spoke about it personally. I think that we would like to take it out with the stadium if possible. Obviously, there's rights issues, and that's something that we can't really go into. But I always think that there's people that maybe can't get to the game, but would love just to hear a fan's, commentary, that passion.
Yeah.
Not saying that the people at Celtic aren't doing a great job, and they do, but I think they would just love to hear it from two fans' point of view that are just, they're paying the hard-earned money to go and see the game, and I think that they would love that. Obviously, that's something that maybe can come in time. Maybe we need to provide justification for that. That's fine, I'm sure we can, but I think that could be something that, again, Celtic could pioneer and be the forefront. They've been the forefront for the women's, which has led to John, and look at the story that's created.
Yeah.
And I think if we could do that for John, just look at what we could maybe do for people who think, they maybe can't get out of the house, but there's that release in 90 minutes watching the team that we support and love.
And on that as well, just to add, the reason I think that would be powerful is if someone has a visual impairment, and yes, say they're following maybe a Celtic TV commentary. A TV commentary, as John Attenborough would tell you, it's great, but at the same time, it doesn't provide that description that people that aren't there or aren't able to see the images, require. And because it would be radio commentary as such, you could be primarily aiming it at users with visual impairment who want to access the service and improving that accessibility. But I think you would get people who don't have a visual impairment, who maybe can't be at the game, who would want to access that service, and I don't think they would be put off by the fact it's an audio descriptive service, because I actually think it's just helpful. Whenever you hear radio commentary, normally you'll get that descriptive element of it at the start, then the commentator might gradually stop being as descriptive, because, say for instance, it was a Liverpool game, they maybe say everybody by the 8th minute maybe knows Andy Robertson's on that left side of the pitch, but we would obviously be constantly referring to that, and I think it could be helpful for so many people that maybe can't get to the game or can't access the images to the game for whatever reason.
There's two elements of the audio descriptive commentary that I think would be really appealing to such users. One is the fact that it's so descriptive. You're telling, as you guys have covered, exactly where in the park the action's taking place and what's going on around that player and detail of that nature. I also think, and I'm trying to think that the right way, or the most positive way to say this, because it's a positive thing, your commentary is more real, less polished. If that's I'm saying that in a positive sense. Whereas radio commentary has to be all quite P's and Q's and highbrow at times. All that kind of stuff. You guys are, in its truest sense, two fans first and foremost. You are what the end users are, and that's why I think there's that link, that kind of tie-in, which maybe doesn't exist just now. And I think if that's something that could be looked at or considered by the club, I think it'd be a great thing. And why not be the pioneer of that service?
Yeah, as I say, I think it could be something that could come, but small steps, maybe make big changes. But I think it'd be fantastic to see. I think anybody that I speak to on the way to the game, because we have like the bibs and the vests that say where the audience, and people will stop me, and like I always remember, this is a little bit different, but I just think it shows you how far-reaching it can be, because it was the James Forrest testimonial, and I was walking up with my dad, and somebody went and tapped me on the shoulder. They went, "Oh, do you do?" He says, "My wife is actually, she can't see at all."
Right.
And he was a carer, I think. "Could you get his commentary?" And I'm like, "See what we can do, certainly." And just by chance, they were sitting very close. If they were sitting far away, it would have been fine. We could have been able to get them round. But it just shows you this, like, putting it out there and just shows you what you can do at the stadium, and that service made that supporters night that wee bit better, albeit it's a testimonial, but it doesn't matter. Still there to honour a great servant. But she was saying, like, you know, that made her day, that made her night. If we can do that in person, what can we do out with?
Yeah. Yeah, do you know, I think it's exciting, and I think there's real possibilities there, and I wish you lads best of luck with that, just, you know, amongst various other good things that you're doing. As we start to head towards the end of the piece, I was just going to ask a question about just how important accessibility at football grounds is to you guys, or has become to you guys. Kevin, you've explained the story about your dad and how that led you into things. Is that something that's made you really passionate about increasing accessibility across the board?
Well, generally, yeah, because like, it makes you see things from a different angle. It really does, because I think we can all be a bit naive as to think, you know, we're very selfish sometimes. Like, as long as we're okay, but it has to be. You know, you look at things, and I would never have known that you can walk in gate 2. I would never have known there's different, you know, like entrances at away stadiums to allow people to get in and out easy. You know, and it makes you aware of your behaviour sometimes, because sometimes, let's face it, we can be quite raucous, but though, like, when you have people who maybe can't be as raucous as you need to take that into consideration. So I think, yeah, I've always thought, you think of it more now because of what we do, not just because of what we're like, because my father's there, but I think as well, we all have a duty, and if we could just make that better for everyone, then the possibilities are endless. You know, as UEFA say, football is for everyone, so let's see if we can do something.
Yeah, 100%. Callum, is accessibility something that you've become more passionate about since working the service?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's one of those things, in all honesty, where, as Kevin said, it's natural, I think, that we all get into our own routine when we go to games or gigs or whatever it may be that we're interested in, and we think, right, I know how I'm getting there, I know I'm going to have a good time, I know who I'm meeting up with, and you don't really worry about the rest. You just kind of focus on you. You're the most important person in that day for that 5 hours or however long you're out for, whereas doing this has certainly highlighted to me on a real basis of, you know, the accessibility needs that are out there for the supporters that come to Celtic and then go to different grounds. As Kevin said, that's the same at St Johnstone or Motherwell or Elgin or Spartans. You know, that's the same throughout the pyramid, throughout the country. And then, as I say, not even just at football, it could be at a different sporting event or what have you. So certainly it's definitely made me passionate to see that positive change can come around. Certainly football in Scotland at the moment, as John Attenborough managed to shine a great light on, is doing a great job of that, and I just hope that goes right through Scottish sport and out with as well.
Yeah, just a really positive thing. Last question for you both. It's kind of twofold, so I'll come to you first, Kevin, and I know you've covered a lot of it in the first part here, but where do you see this kind of service in a few years' time, and where do you see Celtic in a few years' time?
Well, I see the service expanding, definitely. I think there'll be more listeners, and I think that will bring with it its own challenges, but I think challenges that will be met with positivity. Again, we've already spoke about it. I think it could go out with the stadium. I think it's only natural, because there will be the demand for it. There's demand in the form of season tickets being a waiting list. I think it could be the same with regards to even just people just wanting to listen to the game. Where Celtic are in a few years' time, that's
a trickier one.
It's a tricky one considering last night's result. But yeah, I think we are on a good position out with maybe one or two things. I think we do have a good squad at the moment that can always be improved, but I can only see at the moment positivity for the club. I can still see us being, you know, dominant in Scotland, but I think there will be a slight change in terms of European results will get better. That's what I do believe at one point.
I hope you're right. They need to get better, so let's keep the fingers crossed for that. Thanks, Kevin. Callum, your own final thoughts. As I say, where do you think the service might go, and where do you see Celtic in a few years' time?
Echo what Kevin said. Hopefully it can grow within the ground, but also out with the ground longer term, because I certainly think there would be an appetite and a demand for it if it was questioned to people. You know, I think it certainly would take off. And in terms of where Celtic will be, I'll be honest with you, in terms of domestically in Scotland, very positive. I think we've got a really good manager who obviously in his first spell at the club won lots of trophies, has came back, has made a positive impact on the club after we'd lost another manager that everyone had bought into and really liked. So it was a tough job to come back into. So far so good. And as I say, I think in Scotland there's no reason why Celtic can't continue to dominate in terms of the league and the cups, because we should, with the revenue that we're making through player sales and European participation, we should be able to invest that into the squad to continually improve. In terms of where we go in Europe in the next few years, I think that's a tough question for a lot of teams that are in our position, where we're so dominant domestically, but in Europe we're facing teams that, yes, have bigger budgets than us, but are maybe in leagues that are maybe more supportive of their European participation, particularly as you go further into competition. The one thing that I do slightly worry about is obviously qualifiers could be coming back as of next season, and I just hope that we've learned our lessons of the past, where if we are going to be in a qualifying campaign, we have our signings in ready for that qualification campaign, rather than waiting till the qualification period's done and then trying to play catch up towards the end of the window. So I hope that we can be organised and continue to progress, and I don't see any reason why we can't, with the financial state of the club at the moment, a quality manager in place, and hopefully a recruitment strategy which will evolve over time. Let's just say that.
Lots of stuff on the wish list there, Callum, but here's something you're right in. I'm reading between the lines, he's saying Brendan's here for 10 in a row. Is that what you heard as well, Kev?
Well, yeah, I think we'll say that.
I heard a song was sang about it once. And
lads, some brilliant stuff covered all around. As I mentioned before, I'll be sure to include contact details for Alexis, for John Paul Taylor, and details for anyone that wants to, can inquire and look into the service for themselves. But in the meantime, thanks to you both. It's been a genuine pleasure to have you both here in the Celtic Exchange. Best luck with everything you're doing at Celtic Park. Keep up the good work, and let's keep a close eye on what happens moving forward. Thanks again for being on the show.
Thanks very much.
Thanks very much.